The first one through the door, the last one out. That had become my identity over the years at Mason Tech. I was the woman behind the curtain, keeping everything moving while others were still sipping their morning lattes or packing up right at 5 sharp. I didn't mind the workload. Not truly, but I did mind being unseen. My name appeared in press releases, even though I'd designed the system from the ground up. Clients praised the Mason Tech product as if Ryan Mason himself had crafted it line by line in the dark. But it was me. Late nights hunting bugs, weekends spent fixing sloppy code that junior developers had rushed out under pressure. My job title read, Senior Software Engineer. But I handled far more than code. I mentored new hires, calmed irritated clients, rewrote PowerPoint slides minutes before major investor calls, and even stocked the break room with snacks when everyone else forgot. No one asked me to, but the office would unravel if I didn't. The men on the team liked to treat me like the office mom. Polite nods, occasional thanks, but never the respect they gave one another. I'd speak up in meetings and get talked over, suggest a solution, and then watch someone else repeat it 5 minutes later like it was their own idea. Ryan would laugh, clap them on the back, and praise their initiative. Ryan Mason, my boss, my letdown. He was charming in the way some men learn to be, slick hair, perfect white teeth, and just enough fake humility to fool outsiders. To the public, he was the genius founder. To me, he was the man who once asked how long it would take to pretty up the code, like I was applying makeup instead of optimizing infrastructure. I'd been with him since day one, back when the company was just an idea and a website that barely loaded. I believed in his vision then, in his promise to build something clean, useful, and good. I helped turn that vision into reality, but as the company grew, so did his ego. Somewhere along the way, I became just another pair of hands to him. Not a mind, not a partner. Lately, he'd stopped even pretending to care about fairness. Promotions went to men he played golf with. Bonuses were quietly handed to his favorites. I hadn't had a real raise in 3 years. Even though I was now managing 3 projects and overseeing the technical side of the biggest product demo in our company's history, that demo was coming fast, just days away. It was the one that could make or break us in front of investors, and every single technical piece of it depended on me. None of them would admit it out loud, but they knew it, Ryan included. Which is why, despite everything, I kept going. Still, something in his tone lately had shifted. A certain distance, a lack of interest in my updates. One too many meetings I was no longer invited to. I caught him once whispering to the head of HR outside the server room. They fell silent when I walked past, but I said nothing. I kept working, kept smiling, kept perfecting the system just in case. Because deep down, I'd started preparing for something too. The atmosphere in the office had changed. It was subtle, like a shift in air pressure before a storm. And I wasn't the only one who noticed it, but I was the only one who seemed to care. Over the past month, Ryan had begun bringing in a string of new interns, young women straight out of college with minimal qualifications and even less experience. They were mostly friendly, but clearly lost. I tried to help them where I could, answering questions, fixing their code, guiding them through tasks they were plainly untrained to handle. But it was exhausting. I wasn't a team lead. I wasn't even being paid to supervise. And yet, somehow, it became my responsibility. They're here to learn, Ryan had said with a casual shrug when I mentioned the obvious strain it was putting on the rest of us. They're here to be decoration, I thought, but didn't say. They clustered near Ryan's office, always dressed sharply, always eager to impress. I watched him lean in a little too close during conversations, laugh just a bit too loudly at their awkward jokes, and schedule mentoring lunches that didn't involve any real mentoring at all. One morning, I caught one of the interns trying to access our production database, using admin credentials she clearly didn't understand. When I stopped her and asked who had given her permission, she said Ryan told her she was free to poke around. My stomach twisted. It wasn't just the interns. There was something else in Ryan's behavior. He'd grown colder toward me, barely acknowledging my updates, acting irritated whenever I raised critical technical concerns. He canceled one-on-one check-ins without explanation and started asking one of the newer developers, Brent, to lead team calls. Even though Brent's grasp of our system was surface level at best, I still did my job. The investor presentation was only days away, and everything depended on it. The code had to run flawlessly. The system architecture needed to withstand heavy traffic. The live demo had to be secure, polished, and airtight. I was the only one who knew all its moving parts. I'd built it, maintained it, protected it. Every evening that week, I stayed late in the server room. I triple-checked deployment scripts, built fallback sequences, ran fail-safes. I wasn't going to let the investors see a single flaw, not after everything I'd poured into this. But even as I worked, I couldn't shake the sense that something was about to change, like I was laboring on a house whose keys were being quietly handed to someone else. Late Thursday night, I overheard Ryan laughing in his office with the head of HR and one of the board members. The door was cracked just enough for fragments to slip through. She's been around too long. People like that, they stop being flexible. Won't she make a fuss? She's too professional. She'll just swallow it and walk. I stood frozen in the hallway. For a moment, I wondered if they were talking about someone else. But I knew better. I went back to my desk. My hands moved across the keyboard like they were on autopilot. I opened the system's backend where all the presentation data was being routed. And then I opened another file, one I hadn't touched in months. The one with the quiet, simple lines of code that could change everything if triggered. I didn't do anything yet. I just stared at it. I wasn't foolish. I wasn't reckless. But I was ready. The following Monday, Ryan finally showed up in the development room. It was rare for him to wander into the technical side of the office. He preferred glass-walled conference rooms and cozy meetings with investors. But that morning, he walked in like a man inspecting his property. I was at my usual corner desk, headphones on, the demo environment code open in front of me. I had just completed the final security run for the presentation flow, and my task list for the week was nearly finished. The demo was stable, impressive, everything he had asked for. Ryan tapped the desk to get my attention, then motioned for me to remove the headphones. "Hey," he said in that forced casual tone he used when he wanted something. "How's the demo looking?" "It's ready for testing. I ran simulations over the weekend, and the backup protocols are in place. Live interactions are stable. The interface has been refined." He nodded, lips twitching as if trying to show appreciation but forgetting how. "Good. Investors are coming in 2 days. Just make sure everything looks clean. Don't get too technical in your explanations if anyone asks. Keep it simple." I paused. "I won't be speaking at the presentation." His eyes flicked away for half a second. Right. Of course. "Brent will handle the walkthrough." "Of course, Brent." The golden boy with a confident smirk and only half the experience the role demanded. Ryan had decided weeks ago that he'd be the new face of the tech department. I was just the engine behind the curtain, unseen, replaceable. Still, I nodded. Understood. He stared at me a moment longer. I could tell he wanted to say more. His jaw tightened, then eased. He turned and walked away. By Tuesday afternoon, I knew something was wrong. HR had been unusually busy all day. I saw closed-door meetings, saw glances in my direction that vanished the moment I looked up. Around 4:30, an email from HR landed in my inbox. Subject line, meeting request. 5 p.m. today. No details, no agenda. Just a cold calendar invite dropped into my schedule. I knew. I took a breath, saved my files, closed my tabs, and walked to the conference room. Ryan was already there, seated beside the HR director, a woman I'd spoken to maybe 3 times in 10 years. Neither looked particularly at ease. I didn't sit. I stood and waited. Ryan cleared his throat. "We'll get straight to it. The company is restructuring. We've had to make some difficult decisions regarding long-term roles and departmental direction. Effective immediately, your position is being terminated." It was rehearsed. Every word. I stared at him. I didn't speak, just watched him fidget in his expensive chair, avoiding my eyes. "We appreciate your years of service," the HR director added. "You'll receive a severance package. The paperwork is here if you'd like to review it." No warning, no thank you, no acknowledgement of the work I'd done, the hours I'd spent, the life I'd given to this place. I nodded once. Understood. Ryan shifted in his seat. "I know this is unexpected, but we're trusting you to leave quietly and professionally, as you always have." I looked at him calmly. Of course. I picked up my company laptop, set it gently on the table, and slid it toward him. "Everything's in there. The demo, the back end, all functioning." He nodded, relieved. "Thanks. Thank you." I smiled then. Just a little. The kind of smile that makes men like Ryan uneasy. "I hope the investors enjoy the presentation," I said, then turned to HR. "Am I being escorted out?" She hesitated. "Yes, just as a precaution." I nodded again, polite as ever. "Let's go then." The walk through the office was silent. No one looked up. No one said a word. Outside the glass doors, the elevator opened. I stepped inside. The doors slid shut. 10 minutes. That's how long it would take for the system to detect the device handover. And that's when the code would activate. Dot. The elevator hummed as it descended. I stood there watching the floor numbers blink downward, my face calm, my heart pacing like a caged animal. Not from fear, but anticipation. I stepped out onto the street, pulled my coat tighter around me, and walked a few blocks before stopping at a quiet cafe on the corner. I ordered coffee and took a seat by the window. My phone rested face down on the table. I didn't touch it. Not yet. Somewhere 5 stories above, the code was waking up. 10 minutes. That's all it needed. A simple trigger. My admin login revoked, and the laptop connected to the server under a different user. Ryan had no idea I'd created that line of logic to act as a kind of digital tether. Break it, and it would pull a string buried deep in the infrastructure. Back then, I wasn't planning revenge. I was protecting my work. The way he treated people, the way he made decisions behind closed doors, made me nervous. So I wrote the contingency code during a long weekend, never intending to use it. But today, it would finally serve its purpose. At precisely 5:47 p.m., the cafe lights flickered. A coincidence, of course, but it made me smile. I flipped my phone over. The first alert arrived seconds later. System alert. Integrity check failure. Internal assets locked. Then another on the demo server. Credential authorization loop detected. Then a text from Owen, one of the junior engineers who still respected me. "Hey, something's wrong with the back end. The system isn't recognizing Brent's login, and now we can't access the demo scripts at all. Did you do any updates before you left?" I typed a steady reply. "No updates. You might want to ask Ryan." I sipped my coffee and stared out the window. Back at Mason Tech, I could picture the panic. Brent would be sitting at my desk trying to run a walkthrough on a system he barely understood. The demo scripts would keep crashing, each one flashing a red access error. Ryan would bark orders, but no one would know what to fix, because only I knew the structure, the fail-safes, the interdependencies, and I hadn't sabotaged anything. Not really. I hadn't deleted data. I hadn't corrupted code. I'd simply locked the door and only I had the key. My phone buzzed again. Another text. This one from Ryan. What the hell is going on? Call me now. I ignored it. I didn't want to hurt the company. Not the developers, not the interns fumbling through folders they didn't understand. But Ryan had made his choice. He wanted to erase me from the company like I was a mistake to be covered up. Let him explain to the investors why the entire architecture had gone silent hours before the most important presentation in the company's history. Let him explain why his new team couldn't undo a single line of my work. A final message appeared. Short, desperate. If you're doing this out of spite, it's not too late to fix it. We can talk. I'll fix this. Talk now. He wanted to talk. 10 years. 10 years of me being the quiet glue that held everything together. 10 years of late nights, migraines, working through grief, through illness, through holidays alone just to meet his deadlines. He could have talked to me then, but he waited until I was out the door. I set the phone down, took another sip, and let the silence settle. I wasn't done yet. That evening, I didn't go home right away. I walked the city in silence, letting the street noise drown out the storm in my head. It wasn't satisfaction I felt. It was something colder. A strange stillness, like the part of me that had bent backward for years had finally gone quiet. By morning, I expected the system to have crashed completely, but it hadn't. That was the brilliance of it. The code didn't destroy anything. It simply denied access to the systems tied to the presentation. Everything else, email, calendars, even payroll, remained untouched. The demo platform, though, was sealed shut. At 8:13 a.m., Owen called me. I hesitated, then answered. Hey, he said softly, almost nervous. I don't want to get in the middle of anything, but are you okay? The question caught me off guard more than I expected. I'm fine, I said. Why? He sighed. Because this place is a mess. Ryan's losing it. He didn't tell the investors anything last night. He was sure Brent could fix it. Brent just sat there sweating. I smirked to myself. And the demo, it's in read-only mode. We can open the main dashboard, but any action prompts crash instantly. The files are there, but no one can do anything with them. Ryan tried to hire a freelance tech guy last night, but nothing worked. He's panicking. He should be. Owen paused. Look, I know you didn't do anything to break the system. You just built something too complex for anyone else to understand. You don't owe me an explanation. I just wanted to say, I get it. I saw how he treated you. His words stayed with me. In 10 years, no one had ever acknowledged it that plainly. I appreciate that, I said quietly. He's trying to bluff the investors, Owen continued, saying it's just a server sync issue, but they're not buying it. One guy already left. Another threatened to pull funding if the demo isn't functional by noon. I checked the time. It was 9:47. Ryan had 2 hours and no clue what he was really facing. The lockout wasn't irreversible, but it required specific access instructions, an encrypted passphrase I'd created months ago and never stored anywhere. Only I knew it, and I wasn't in a forgiving mood. At 10:22, another message from Ryan appeared. I need to talk to you. I'm sorry for how things happened. Let's figure something out. Empty words. He wasn't sorry for what he'd done. He was sorry it had consequences. I didn't reply. At 10:38, the phone rang again. This time, it was an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. A few seconds later, I played the message. It was Ryan. Listen, I underestimated you. All right. I thought, look, this company, everything I've built, it's falling apart. Please, if you come in, if you unlock the system, we can fix this. We can bring you back in. You'd have a role, maybe even more than before. Just call me. It was almost laughable. The man who fired me in a room like I was an afterthought was now offering me more than I'd ever asked for because he had no other choice. I didn't delete the message. I didn't respond either. By 11 o'clock, Owen messaged again. Investors are walking out. One of them called Mason Tech a liability. Ryan's trying to blame it on the system and on you, but I think everyone can see through it. That was the moment I knew it was over. Not just the demo, the illusion. For years, I thought if I just worked harder, they'd see my value. That loyalty meant something, that staying silent and dependable would lead to recognition. But it never did. It never was going to. By the afternoon, the story had already begun to leak. Tech blogs that usually recycled PR spin started posting articles with vague but ominous headlines. Startup darling Mason Tech hit with unexpected technical failure during demo. Major backers pull out of Mason Tech project following presentation chaos. One particularly brutal post read, "Sources say Mason Tech's internal systems were inaccessible just hours before a key investor showcase. Did internal mismanagement cost them everything?" I couldn't help but feel the irony. Ryan had always controlled the narrative, always held the upper hand. But now, his silence was louder than any damage control he could attempt. The cracks were showing, and the world was watching. That evening, around 7 p.m., I received a message from a name I didn't recognize, a woman named Dana. "I used to work at Mason Tech. I left 2 years ago. I heard what happened today, and I just wanted to say, good for you." That simple message made something split open inside me. Dana had been in marketing. I vaguely remembered her. She'd quietly disappeared after what Ryan had called performance issues. Now I wondered if she'd just been another inconvenient woman with too much integrity and not enough tolerance for his games. She wasn't the only one who reached out. A QA specialist I'd trained 4 years ago sent me a voice note thanking me for being the only person who treated her like a peer. An intern from last summer messaged and said, "I remember how calm and kind you were when I kept messing up. You didn't make me feel stupid." The messages were small, but they built something. A quiet chorus of voices reminding me that I wasn't crazy or weak or too sensitive. That maybe I'd been right all along to feel used. I spent that night going through my notes, not about Mason Tech, but about an idea I'd pushed aside for years. A platform simpler, cleaner, focused on real human connection rather than glossy investor bait. I'd even sketched wireframes long ago, tucked into a folder labeled Someday. Well, maybe someday had finally arrived. The next morning, Ryan called again. This time, he didn't leave a voicemail. Just a missed call, then another, and another. At 11:04 a.m., I finally answered. "I don't want to fight," he said immediately. His voice was hoarse, tired, stripped of all the arrogance I'd come to associate with it. "Just listen, okay?" I didn't speak. I let the silence carry the weight. "I was wrong," he said. "I should have handled things differently. You were always... Look, we've lost nearly everything. The board is threatening to pull the plug. I need you to help me fix this. I'll give you full autonomy. Name your role, your salary. CTO, partner, whatever you want." There it was, desperation disguised as generosity. "I don't want your title," I said quietly. "Then what do you want?" I paused, then said, "I want to see what you do without me." And I hung up. He didn't call again. That evening, Owen sent one more message. "I know it's none of my business, but whatever you do next, I'd like to be part of it. If you need someone who still believes in building something real." I stared at the message for a long moment. Then I opened the Someday folder and began again. By the end of the week, the industry had taken notice. Tech media outlets published detailed breakdowns of Mason Tech's collapse. A leaked investor memo revealed how the presentation system had mysteriously failed and how the board was reviewing leadership changes. In reality, that meant one thing: Ryan was out. More interesting, though, were the direct messages I began receiving from unfamiliar names: executives, venture capital partners, even journalists. They weren't just gossiping, they were curious, and some of them wanted to talk business. One name stood out: Claire, the co-founder of Finchwave, a rising mid-sized competitor that had recently launched a streamlined data sharing platform. She messaged me directly. "I've followed your work for years, and I'd love to hear what you're building next, and maybe how we can be part of it." We met at a quiet restaurant 2 days later. Claire was sharp, direct, and refreshingly honest. She didn't want me to fix Finchwave. She wanted to invest in me. "I read your original system architecture for Mason Tech, the parts you wrote, not the PR gloss. It was clean, elegant, too good for what they built around it. Whatever you're planning, I want in." I told her about the idea. I had something more personal, something centered on usability, privacy, and true autonomy for the user. Not a bloated system designed for slide decks, but a platform that respected the people behind the screens. She didn't hesitate. "I'll put up the seed money," she said, "but I want to see a pitch. Something real." It was the first time in months I felt awake. That night, Owen and I worked in his apartment until 2 in the morning. We dusted off the old notes, reorganized the system flow, and built a clean prototype interface. It wasn't flashy, but it was real, functional, clear. We named it Rootline, a nod to origin, to building something honest from the ground up. 3 days later, we presented it to Claire, and unknowingly to 3 investors who had originally backed Mason Tech. They listened. Owen handled the walkthrough. I focused on vision, scale, and implementation. It was calm, professional, no theatrics. When I finished, one of the investors leaned back and said, "This is what we thought we were getting with Mason Tech." Claire smiled. "It's what you'll get now, without the ego." By the end of the week, 2 of the investors who had walked out of Ryan's failed demo signed early-stage letters of intent with us. And just like that, the same room that once discarded me became the place where I stood tall. Not as a silent worker behind someone else's success, but as the woman at the front of the room, speaking clearly, being heard. I didn't gloat. I didn't mention Mason Tech once, but I knew Ryan had heard. The industry grapevine was fast. Publicly, Mason Tech had gone quiet. Their social media pages were untouched. Their website still listed Brent as lead engineer. But I knew the truth behind the titles. The man who once mocked my quiet diligence was now a ghost in the company he thought he controlled. And I was building something that didn't need to steal to survive. Rootline's development moved quickly, sometimes too quickly. After years of hiding behind quiet execution, I had to adjust to being the one others turned to for decisions. Not just code fixes or system patches, but real leadership. At first, I over-explained everything, second-guessed myself, slipped back into the habit of apologizing before making a suggestion. But Owen wouldn't let me shrink again. "You don't need to over-justify what you already know," he said one night as we reviewed the user onboarding logic. "You taught me half of this. Don't apologize for building something smarter." There was no flattery in his voice, just steady honesty. That was what made it land. It had been years since someone in tech made me feel competent without trying to compete or control. Owen and I fell into a rhythm quickly, complementary without being dependent. I focused on infrastructure, back-end logic, and integrity. He built clean, intuitive, user-facing design and wrote documentation like someone who genuinely cared that users would understand it. Rootline wasn't a social platform. It wasn't a networking tool for growth hacking or corporate jargon. It was built for community-based teams, small businesses, nonprofits, people who didn't have IT departments or PR budgets. It offered simple encrypted collaboration tools and a file-sharing interface that didn't. Sell user data to the highest bidder. We didn't need to reinvent the wheel. We just needed to stop coding it in glitter and calling it a rocket. One afternoon, while sketching user flows on a shared whiteboard, Owen asked quietly, "Do you ever think about what would have happened if you'd said yes to Ryan?" I paused, marker in hand. "I'd probably be CTO of a company that still treated me like an assistant," I said. He smiled slightly. "Good answer. Do you regret staying there so long?" He shrugged. "I learned a lot, mostly from you. But yeah, I should have walked out the first time I saw him take credit for your work." It was the first time either of us acknowledged the depth of what we'd been through. There was something healing in saying it out loud. No rage, no bitterness, just the truth, finally spoken without fear of consequence. That evening, after hours of building, we ordered takeout and stayed at the office late, watching early users interact with the demo version of Rootline. A small nonprofit from Portland used it to organize a digital fundraiser within 2 hours of signing up. A community library from Michigan uploaded a newsletter using our formatting tool and left a comment. "We've been looking for something like this for years." It wasn't massive traction, but it was real, and it was ours. When the last messages were read and the final line of code was committed for the night, Owen lingered at the door. "You know," he said softly, "if you ever want to build more than software together—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I didn't answer. Not yet. My heart was still somewhere between exhaustion and recovery, but I didn't shut the door either. "Let's start with building this," I said, nodding toward the screen where Rootline's name flickered in clean, quiet confidence. "Fair enough," he replied, and he smiled the kind of smile that asked nothing of me, but said everything. 3 months later, Rootline was still small, but it was steady, clean, real. We'd signed up our 100th organization the week before. A mutual aid network in rural Pennsylvania reached out, thanking us for building something that didn't treat people like data. That meant more to me than any award, any flashy contract. Owen and I had settled into a rhythm that didn't need defining. We worked hard. We argued over design margins. We ate late dinners in the same office where we'd built the first prototype. There was warmth there now, quiet understanding, and maybe, just maybe, something more. But neither of us rushed it. We'd built this thing on trust. There was no need to hurry anything else. One Monday morning, I opened my inbox to find a forwarded article from Claire with a subject line that read, "You might want to see this." I clicked the link. Mason Tech faces new internal conflict as senior engineer resigns, citing hostile culture and CEO misconduct. I froze. The article described a familiar story. A new engineer, this time a man, had quit after raising concerns about intellectual theft and manipulation within the team. Apparently, the temporary CEO brought in to replace Ryan hadn't lasted long. The board had reshuffled again, desperate to hold on to what little reputation the company still had. They were floundering. What struck me wasn't satisfaction. It was clarity. It hadn't been me. It hadn't been my age or my tone or my supposed inability to adapt to culture. It had been the culture itself, rotting from the center, consuming anyone who didn't fit a narrow mold of obedience and silence. The narrative I'd once feared, maybe I wasn't enough, was finally dead. Owen looked over my shoulder at the screen. "You okay?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, I really am." For the first time, I saw it from the outside. The whole machine I'd once clung to, desperate for a place in it, was falling apart on its own. No sabotage, no scandal, just bad leadership repeating itself until there was no one left to blame. I closed the tab. "I need to get back to the API update." I said with a small smile. The education group in Vermont wants a new module before next week. You got it, Owen said. Then, after a pause, you want me to handle the UX notes for them? I looked at him. Steady, kind, capable. I'd like that, I said. And that was it. No dramatic victory speech. No final confrontation with Ryan. Just a clean desk, a working system, and the quiet joy of building something that didn't hurt anyone to create. I still had my archived files, my old Mason Tech badge, the faded sticky notes from the long nights I'd worked alone. But I kept them as reminders, not wounds. Reminders that I'd survived, that I'd built, that I'd mattered. Not because someone gave me a title, but because I never stopped believing I could do it without them. The real revenge wasn't the crash or the locked demo or the headlines. It was peace. It was knowing I'd walked away and still built something better. And in the end, that was more than enough.